Thank you, Mark, and thank you everybody for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. It's very risky, isn't it, to spend an hour or so away from the news at the moment. I mean, at this very moment, there's probably another resignation going on, an arrest, or somebody impeccably dressed, perhaps delivering a rather smart right hook. I'm hoping we won't see more fighting this evening, but perhaps so. So thanks for choosing to spend time with us tonight. Seriously, tonight is a really good opportunity for those of us involved in social research and survey research, in particular the social survey, whether as practitioners, commissioners, users, and also participants and interviewers. We have some here tonight. Thank you very much for coming. To really reflect on one particularly big question, which is, are the days of the social survey numbered? Let me start, like all good researchers, by briefly defining my terms, if I may. When I say the social survey, I'm particularly thinking about research that produces quantitative data, that employs a defensibly representative sample, interesting what you might consider that to be, has some kind of interaction with human beings who consider their responses and are aware that they're answering questions as part of a research project. So I'm not actually restricting it to face-to-face surveys. I would certainly include web surveys as long as they've got a defensively representative sample. And by social, I think this is actually the harder part to define. I'd be interested in your definitions. But I would define it as meaning something where we're primarily looking at people, at the public, as citizens rather than as consumers. I think that's a pretty good, narrows it down really. And I'm sure that we can all agree in this room that the question of whether the social survey can or will endure is a very urgent question that we must answer. After all, if we think about it economically, as Mark was saying, there's much less, the social survey is very expensive and there's less money to spend on them. Politically, there are definitely some politicians who are very hostile, and we've seen some very high-profile cancellations. Technologically, we're seeing new players come in and scraping and visualizing data. And socially, we are seeing the public generate huge amounts of widely available data about their own lives. So I think the question of whether the social survey will endure becomes really, it's a question of, is it just a matter of time before policymakers, commentators and regulators can fulfill all their information needs by social media listening and perhaps fancy portals that allow them to visualize administrative data? In a sense, that's the key question. And for me, I'm genuinely concerned that with so many voices questioning the relevance of the social survey, that we do risk a sort of unnecessary collective loss of confidence, and it's really that I want to address tonight. And certainly, just because something was invented a long time ago, which the social survey was, it doesn't obviously mean that it's irrelevant. I was reminded of this last night when I was at the proms for Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, famous for provoking a riot nearly 100 years ago at its premiere in Paris. And despite the fact that it is pretty much 100 years old, and despite the fact that it employs incredibly old-fashioned technology, orchestral instruments, Stravinsky's music is very much still as exciting now as it was then. And really what I'm wanting to argue tonight is that there is still something uniquely valuable about the social survey, despite its great age. And also, I'm going to focus on its positive qualities. I'm not going to do the easy thing of somehow critiquing and criticising other methodologies. I want it to stand in its own terms, really. So let's just remind ourselves of what amazing and, in my view, indispensable things the social survey can do that other methods can't do, certainly can't do alone. Certainly not yet, and certainly not, in my view, for the foreseeable future. And I'm going to take one particularly good study, the English Longitudinal Study for Aging, or ELSA, as it's affectionately known. As many of you will know in the room, ELSA studies people beyond the age of 50 and looks in detail at the realities and experiences of the aging process for different groups of the population. And in my view, it's absolutely irreplaceable. I mean, first of all, the core of it is, with a representative sample, it asks detailed questions about different areas of an older person's life. Older person, I just realised I come into that category now, of the 50-pluses life, about their health, physical, mental, cognitive, about work and retirement, about income and wealth, social participation, and other aspects of well-being. And we don't just ask people questions. Having got a really great sample, with consent, we link their answers to various administrative data sets held by the Revenue, by DWP, hospital episodes, and mortality and cancer registers. We collect objective health information. Nurses take blood and saliva samples for testing, including for DNA, and we test people's physical mobility, balance, and so on. And of course, because it's a longitudinal study, we follow people up over time, so we're looking at people every 2 years. And there are research colleagues doing very similar things across the globe, so we can look at international comparisons. And with a study like ELSA, as new sort of thoughts and methodologies come on stream, we can just take the survey from strength to strength. So, for example, most recently, behavioural economists designed gaming scenarios to look at individual kind of propensity to risk, which has been fascinating, not least because respondents actually get a chance to win real money. Some of the best-known findings, perhaps not the most sophisticated, but some of the most best-known, are that women are more likely to become lonely in old age than men, and that biological aging actually appears to be slower in people who are better off economically, and that's actual measures of biological aging. Perhaps less surprising, if you're English and middle-aged, you're likely to be a lot healthier than your American counterparts. Now, as valuable as other tools are, I do think that there are distinctively valuable characteristics of the social survey. It's about consistency, completeness, and ensuring all sections of the population are properly represented. I think you'll agree in hearing what ELSA does. It's amazingly rich and connected data. And in the case of longitudinal studies, the sort of most fantastic beasts of all, if you like, you've got that fantastic ability to track individuals over time. And to my mind, such studies have real power when they bring the experiences of every section of society to decision makers. If you think back to my ELSA examples, I think it's unarguable that older people and the less well-off have less of a voice in our society. And we know that data from ELSA has created a common understanding, a common evidence base, and has fed directly into a number of really important policy debates on retirement, on pensions, on social care, and so on, about health qualities and so on. And so a great evidence base is essential in a well-functioning democracy, and the social survey is an essential component of that great evidence base. It's a really compelling way of connecting people's real lived experiences with decision makers. So I believe that far from a situation where we're all going to be made obsolete by the forces of technology, politics, economic and social change, I think the social survey has got every reason to have a bright future. Obviously, it's not all roses. We must continue to tackle really difficult and important challenges like response rates. I'm not going to list all the technical challenges here because I think Ray will do that, and then I'm sure some of you in the audience, I'll let you do it, and that will be great. So I want to talk less about some of the technical things that we know well, and more about some of what I see as the opportunities, really, in the social survey for exploiting its potential as an indispensable tool of democracy. At the moment, I think it's fair to say that too often, those of us involved both in commissioning and in the production of the social survey, we don't actually take full account of the human beings on the receiving end, and that's currently limiting the potential of the tool. And I think if we're serious about the idea of the social survey becoming a really important and indispensable kind of an authentic tool in the sense of the democratic process, I think there are some things we can do. I'm sure you'll have your own ideas, but here are a few of mine. I think the first is proper consultation with the public on the objectives and the content of major research projects. I think we could definitely do more there. That would certainly involve clients moving beyond I completely understand it, I've been a client myself, but the understandable tendency to specify surveys to within an inch of their lives. I can see some nodding here from some of our very important clients. Hello. And more involvement from commissioners and researchers with the realities of data collection on the ground so that everybody really understands that interaction in people's homes. Much better information to our survey participants on what actually happens to survey findings, what the results are, and how it's used. I just think it's kind of amazing in the sense that we don't do more of that more rigorously. And a collective commitment to ensure that we don't just deliver, my goodness, that rain, the single research project, but to ensure that data has an enduring life beyond the timescale of the individual project. So tonight I'd certainly, after you've heard Ray, welcome your views on whether you share this diagnosis and your own views on what it might mean in practice. And I'd encourage all of us in this room, we've got people obviously here involved in Social Research Association, the MRS, from Government Social Research, the ESRC, and you know, were there to be a new chief social scientist, if the government accept the Lord's recommendation from yesterday, I think we can all play our role in actually delivering this agenda. After all, it's an issue that affects us all, and in my view, unless we take steps, the social survey will be under threat, but not from technological or conceptual obsolescence, but because of a failure to fully consider the public, who, after all, should be consistently at the very heart of what we do. Thank you very much.